There is a piece of writing advice that I hear all the time, and I think it does more harm than good. I think it does real harm to new writers and new storytellers. Quote, "You have to know your theme before you start writing." End quote. I don't. I don't give a horse's big behind about theme. When I get an idea for a story, theme is the last thing on my mind. And the longer that I've been reading and writing and watching TV and film, the more I'm convinced that theme is not where stories come from. Ever. Or maybe almost ever. Let me put something straight right up front. Theme is real. Theme matters. And if a writer knows the theme going in, that's perfectly fine. What I'm pushing back against is this idea that theme is mandatory, that if you don't know your theme ahead of time, then somehow you're doing it wrong. Theme is not a license, it's not a prerequisite, and it's not a moral obligation. Most of the time, theme is something that we notice after the story exists. It's not something that generates the story in the first place. Where does this advice come from? Usually from three places. First, we got academia. These are literature professors analyzing finished works. They identify themes because that's how we talk about stories after they're written. That doesn't mean that that's how they were created. Secondly, you've got writing gurus and YouTube advice culture. Know your theme. It sounds disciplined, it sounds professional, and it fits nicely into a little thumbnail. Real writing is messy, and messes don't monetize well. Thirdly, you've got this workshop culture. Theme becomes a stand-in for taste. I didn't like this, therefore the theme is unclear. That's not craft advice, that's preference wearing a tweed jacket. None of these people are evil. They're just solving different problems than actually writing stories. Here's the thing that really cracks this wide open for me. Theme is often posthumous. By that I don't mean that it's, after the author dies. I mean it's after the story is released into the world. Let's take Frankenstein. Today we're told that it's about a man playing God, that it's about science without ethics. It's about hubris. And I agree, that's exactly what it's about. But Mary Shelley didn't sit down to write a sermon about technology. She was participating in a ghost story competition. She was writing for dread and atmosphere and loneliness and fear. This is a woman who had a very hard life filled with tragedy. This is a woman who was in a culture where ghost stories were the way people passed the time. There's no evidence that Mary Shelley ever set out to write a thematic cautionary tale in the way that we describe it today. The theme emerged later through readers and critics and culture. And it became so powerful that Frankenstein turned into a metaphor that the author never planned. But that's not failure, that's success. Here's the important part, and this is where people get a little touchy. The people who assign themes to stories, they're not wrong. If someone reads Fahrenheit 451 and they see a warning about censorship, that theme is real because it exists in their experience of the book. The author isn't wrong either. Ray Bradbury said that he was writing about distraction and television. Both interpretations can coexist. Neither cancels the other. The idea is sometimes called the death of the author. And that phrase sounds dramatic, but it's very simple. It kind of goes like this, that once a story is released into the world, the author doesn't lose legal ownership, but they do lose interpretive monopoly. Meaning is no longer dictated, it's negotiated. Ray Bradbury had a theme in mind when he wrote his book, but that's not the theme that the public picked up on. That's okay, because it's the personal experience of the reader and the personal experience of the writer. Both of them are valid. I wrote a book called Amber Lee and the Daylight Medallion, and it's available as an ebook on Amazon if anybody's interested. But when I wrote that book, the theme was the last thing on my mind. I wasn't trying to say something profound. I was just writing a fun adventure for my daughter. The story came from images and ideas. I loved the old movie monsters, Dracula, the werewolf, the mummy, Frankenstein's monster, and I developed this story that involved all of them, and it was, about an Egyptian medallion that could control the sun and Count Dracula wanting that power. And it was kind of an Indiana Jones style chase through classic monster mythology. There was only one small thing that I was consciously aware of, and it wasn't the theme, it was kind of a message. And it was a very personal one. I made Count Dracula very good looking, and I made Frankenstein's monster not so good looking. And that was it. The quiet idea there was that good looks don't equal good intentions, and ugliness doesn't equal evil. But that wasn't a thesis. It was just kind of a parent kind of whispering a lesson to their kid. Anything else people might read into that story, that comes later, from readers, if I ever had any. The book I'm writing on right now, called The Mummies of Hakata, I still don't have a theme. And I didn't start with one, and I don't feel the need to invent one. What inspired me to write the story wasn't even a message or anything, it was just an image. I had read about salt mummies somewhere in northern Africa. These were ordinary people preserved by salt mine collapses, and they were preserved so perfectly that it was eerie. That image stuck in my head, and I started building a story around it. Yes, there are characters in my story that are wrestling with destiny and resentment and legacy, but that's not why I sat down to write. Those things emerged because people behave like people when you put them under pressure. If I had to force a theme onto either of these stories before they existed, I would have strangled them before I had ever written a word. When I start a story, theme is the furthest thing from my mind. Now let me say that again. When I start a story, theme never crosses my mind. I don't care. And more important than anything else I have to say in this video, theme doesn't motivate me to write. I don't care. And I'll bet you theme doesn't motivate you to write either. So let's follow the logic here. If a writer can intend a theme and be misunderstood, and if a writer can have no theme and still produce something meaningful, then theme cannot be the thing that makes or breaks a story. Stories don't succeed or fail because of themes. They succeed because of characters and situations and tension and curiosity and emotional truth, and the reader experiences all of those things. Theme is what condenses afterward, like sediment. Theme is what literary professors find after an autopsy. Theme is meaning found by the audience. Theme is a byproduct. What's the theme of Star Wars? Who cares? Put a bag of popcorn in the microwave and let's watch it. What's the theme of Michael Crichton's Sphere? I don't care. I love that book, and it scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. What's the meaning behind Monty Python and the Holy Grail? I don't give a rat's ass. I hate this myth. I hate this myth that you have to know your theme before you tell your story. And my great fear is that it has choked the life out of new writers and storytellers that we may never get to hear from because they gave up. They didn't know their theme, and after hours of sweating over blank pages and pulling their hair out, they just threw down their pencils and decided that they weren't writers. Dear God, they might have become politicians or lawyers. You see what this dogma could do to our society. If you know your theme going in, great, write it. If it motivates you to tell your story, more power to you, and I am happy for you. If you don't know what your theme is, that doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're writing the way that people always have. Theme isn't something that you install in a story. It's something that happens to a story once people start living with the experience of your story. That's not a flaw in storytelling. That's the point. Know your theme? I don't care, and I bet you don't either. Thanks for listening.